In a counter-terrorism raid in Nablus, the IDF finally eliminated the terrorist leader known as the Lion of Nablus. An update on the Gaza war and how world leaders are viewing it. Yair Lapid addresses the nation after the completion of Operation Breaking Dawn, and Hezbollah calls for a national uprising amid threats against Israel. I'm Justin, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Good morning, guys. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you back today. Make sure to like the video, really helps us out. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, we're trying to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're well on our way to it, but we need your help. And also, click on the notification bell to never miss an episode of the Israel Guys. Guys, today is the deadline for signing up for a volunteer trip with us this fall. If you want to come to Israel to experience biblical prophecy, get your hands dirty, and to work in the agriculture and go to places that most tour groups actually do not go, make sure to go to serveisrael.com to sign up for one of our volunteer trips. You do not want to miss it. So yesterday morning, Tuesday morning, the IDF went into Nablus to arrest the terrorist leader, Ibrahim al-Nablusi, otherwise known in the Arab world as the Lion of Nablus. So a counter-terrorism unit, they operated in Shechem, or Nablus in Arabic. They surrounded the home of the terrorist, and for the purpose of arresting him, they called to him to turn himself in. But al-Nablusi responded with fire, and then the IDF shot back with grenades and anti-tank missiles until later al-Nablusi was finally eliminated. So who is this guy? Al-Nablusi, he's been a commander of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is basically like the military wing of the Palestinian Authority. It's part of the Fatah faction and the Palestinian Authority. This guy is not good. Very evil person who is responsible for the lives of many Israelis. The IDF have been trying to catch him for quite a while. He was involved in the shooting at Joseph's tomb back in April, when hundreds of Arabs stormed the Joseph's tomb and they vandalized the place. 2 Haredi Jewish men were actually shot when they were trying to visit the tomb. So definitely not a good guy. Thank God that he was eliminated, that the IDF were finally able to find him and take him out. He needed to be taken out. This is justice here in Israel. Very bad guy. After the elimination, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is the organization that has been shooting rockets out of Gaza for the past few days on Israel, they called for a national uprising, and also Hamas blamed the Palestinian Authority for cooperating with Israel. They're saying that that the Palestinian Authority police did not try to stop Israel when they went in to take out this terrorist. So while the PA may not have done anything, they definitely weren't cooperating with Israel, like trying to help or anything. The PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they said, quote, "The Zionist occupation continues its crimes against the Palestinian nation and carries out a new act of stupidity with its aggression on the city of Shechem, Nablus." Also, the terror group's spokesperson in Judea and Samaria, Taraq Az-Adin, he responded to the eliminations by saying, "The aggression in Shechem requires national and military uprising from every Palestinian, and there's no room for excuses starting from today. The enemy is spilling the blood of our Palestinian nation and deepening its crimes in an unprecedented fashion against our people in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem. We are one nation. The occupation does not discriminate between this faction or that faction. It has made a target of the entire Palestinian nation. This requires that we unite our forces and respond to these crimes." Obviously, this is a terrorist leader speaking here, so we're not going to believe anything he says. Israel is not discriminating. They're not making a target of the entire Palestinian nation. There's not even a Palestinian nation, but they're not targeting Palestinians just randomly. They're actually taking out known terrorist leaders who are very evil people who definitely need to be taken out. So what's going on with the war with Gaza, as people are calling it, or Operation Breaking Dawn? So a ceasefire was declared Sunday night at 11:30 p.m. Egypt arranged this ceasefire between the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Israel. And since then, there has been no rockets fired or strikes from Israel onto Gaza. There's been peace, I guess you could say it, since then. But the IDF put out an infographic on Twitter with the statistics of the war, which I thought was very interesting. 1,100 rockets were actually launched at Israel from Gaza just in this short time frame, and actually 200 misfired and landed inside of Gaza, in which several children were unfortunately killed. Initially, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they blamed Israel for the death of these children, and quite a few news anchors, the mainstream media were picking up this story, like the BBC, Al Jazeera, the Associated Press. They were all saying that Israel killed these children. But then the IDF, actually even a member of Knesset, an Arab member of Knesset, blamed Israel. But then the IDF put out a video later of a rocket coming from Gaza, and it fell short into this neighborhood where these children were killed. And it 100% proved that the children were killed by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and not by Israel. The Arab MK had to delete his tweet later. Not a good move for him. Also, the IDF, Israel's Iron Dome intercepted 380 rockets with a 96% success rate. Thank God for the Iron Dome protecting the nation of Israel. The IDF also attacked 170 terror tunnels belonging to the Islamic Jihad group, and they destroyed a terror tunnel, which had not yet crossed into Israel, thankfully. So after all this happened, after the operation ended and everything, the Gaza border crossings with Israel were actually reopened quite quickly. And what the mainstream media will never tell you is that with this border opening, it will actually allow 14,000 Palestinians to be able to return to work inside of Israel. The media will never tell you that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are actually keeping their own people from having a livelihood, from earning a living inside of Israel. Israel is providing jobs to tons of Palestinians inside of Israel, and by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad firing rockets, they're keeping their own people from earning a livelihood. It's really sad here. So what are world leaders saying about all this, about the operations that have been going on? The Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he condemned Israel for its 2-day shooting war with the Islamic Jihad terrorist organization. He even went so far as to accuse Israel of murdering children. He said, for a couple of days, while Israeli officials have attacked Palestinian civilians, we've clearly demonstrated our stance. There is no excuse for murdering babies. The Republic of Turkey stands with the people of Gaza and our Palestinian brothers and sisters. I don't know how he could be saying this when it was 100% proved that Israel did not kill these children, that they were killed in the Jabalia neighborhood. They were killed by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that came out of Gaza and fell short. There was a video confirmed 100%. Thankfully, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, she condemned the Islamic Jihad over rocket fire on Israel. She said, "We're deeply saddened by reports of civilian casualties and need to swiftly and thoroughly investigate each of them. We should refrain from jumping to conclusions until we can determine the facts." As just one example, Israel was originally blamed for an attack that inflicted civilian casualties in Jabalia refugee camp. It now appears to have been caused by a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket, so let us be sure to follow the facts and see where they lead us. We fully support Israel's rights to defend its people against terrorist threats, including from rocket fire aimed at civilians or without regard to them. We also believe that Israelis and Palestinians equally deserve to live in safety and security, and we are working assiduously toward that end. Very true here. Thankfully, she is condemning the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and she's actually, condemning them and praising Israel throughout this. She actually praised Yair Lapid's efforts later, and she went on to condemn the PIJ. So after the operation ended and everything, Prime Minister Yair Lapid, he addressed the nation Monday night. He started out by saying, "Operation Breaking Dawn gave Israel back the initiative. It brought back Israeli deterrence. All of our goals were achieved. The entire military elite of the Islamic Jihad in Gaza was routed. Within 3 days, the strength and sophistication of the IDF dealt the enemy a heavy blow. Indeed, they did. Very good job by the IDF here. Very precise firing and striking on Gaza. They did not harm civilians. They tried their best not to harm civilians, and their striking and targeting was very precise, and they did a very good job. So in an address in honor of the Muslim holiday of Ashura, which I guess apparently was just yesterday, the Hezbollah Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah, he threatened Israel and sent a message to Arab nations surrounding Israel. He addressed the IDF's recent operations on Gaza, Operation Breaking Dawn, addressing fellow Arab nations, specifically those who have ties with Israel. He said, quote, Palestine is a major issue. We do not expect compassion or justice from the Americans or the tyrants, referring to Israel, but we turn to those who call themselves Arabs. Where are they when Arab blood is spilled in the West Bank and Jerusalem and Gaza? Again, this is a terrorist leader speaking. We do not need to believe any word he says. They're all lies coming out of his mouth, calling Israel a tyrant, and also saying that Israel is spilling Arab blood in the West Bank, which is not happening at all. Israel's not just randomly striking Palestinians. They're taking out terrorist leaders, and they're doing very precise striking on Palestinian terrorist posts and on the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So on Saturday night, 2 Jewish boys were attacked by Arabs on their way to the Kotel just before the start of the 9th of Av fast, which commemorates and mourns the destruction of the 2 temples in Jerusalem and a lot of other tragedies that happened to the Jewish people. So, as I said, 2 Jewish boys were making their way to the Kotel to pray, and they were attacked by 3 Arabs with brass knuckles and rocks. As they were passing a house, they jumped out at them and brutally attacked them. They knocked out one of the boys. He lost consciousness, and he was later taken to the hospital. I think he's in light condition now, but the Arabs escaped, and I think the police are still on the search for them. Guys, let us know what you think in the comments below. We love to interact with you and engage with you. Love to hear what you think. Tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening in the land of Israel. We'll be back every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.